So I would like to thank both of you guys for attending. We have a very, very special opportunity to cover what I consider a very important subject. So this is being recorded, and I'm really excited about promoting this on our YouTube channel and throughout all of our different communications channels. So all of you are aware of what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. And in Russia, we may have very, very different opinions about the communication that is being shared. There certainly are a very diverse set of opinions. And one of the things that I really admire about GBA is we have people with very diverse set of opinions because there's very many different perspectives. And I find that when there's conflict, it's generally a result of three things. We either have different facts, and we can talk to each other and educate each other on those facts if we're open-minded and willing to listen. Two, because we have different life experiences, we connect the dots differently, right? And we can work with each other to help at least people understand, you know, why you're connecting the dots that way and why I'm connecting the dots this way. So we can have, like Scott talked about last night, we can have empathy. And then thirdly, we have different values, right? And having different values doesn't make somebody mean somebody is evil. Somebody might value independence, right? While somebody else might value collective security. And neither one of them are bad, but they're different. And they'll cause us to come to different positions of agreement. And then the other thing is we have different affinity groups, right? We become tribal, right? So my big thing is I really don't like tribalism. I believe that tribalism has been the reason why we have had genocides and terrible atrocities, one group for another, because we become more concerned about connecting with our tribe than having integrity, right? So one of the things that I really appreciate about GBA is that we invite those kind of conversations. We ask people to let others finish their sentence, and we ask others to be open-minded to listen to and try to appreciate other perspectives. Now, that being said, we have the two folks on our panel that, in my opinion, are, gosh, some of the best people in the world we could have on this topic, and let me explain why. In the blockchain space, we're really interested in censorship-resistant communications, right? We believe, we believe that people ought to have all the facts and data and make up their own mind, right? and so with that, we've got two folks. So, George, we've never met before, right? But I'm super excited that we've met, and I really hope we can spend some time talking. So, George Farmer is the CIO of, it's now called Parliament Technologies, right? So, during the 2020 election, there was a little controversy. Do you guys remember that? Right? Okay. I thought it was just me, right? Yeah, it was on the news a little bit. And as some of you may know, the Trump organization was deplatformed by, I believe it was Twitter and Facebook, right? And so they went over to another social media, I guess probably others, but Parler was one of them. And then, and maybe you can tell the story, they were deplatformed by, I believe, was it Azure or AWS or?
Yeah, it was Amazon and Google and Apple.
Yeah. So, look, you may love the Trump organization and MAGA, you may hate them. That's not really the issue. The issue is truth essentially being allowed to get out, or maybe not truth, but are people allowed to open that conversation? So George is the CEO, and he had to deal with the issue of an entity, a centrally controlled entity, controlling what speech was put out. Incidentally, in the blockchain maturity model, one of the most important things, in my opinion, is distribution, right? So we actually, this is one of the areas that we talk about. Deborah, who again, we've never met before, but I do love your purple hair. It threw me, right? But she's built a system of communications and providing the technology to allow people to have open communications. And then Michael Proper, thank you for joining us. He is with Clear Communications and also provides a technology framework. So the people we have on the panel today are phenomenal in terms of their experience and their ability to provide capabilities with respect to that. And I had emailed them the the questions, and since I'm totally unprepared, I don't have it in front of me. So let me take a minute. Deborah, George, and then Michael, just do just a minute introduction about yourself. It'll give me a chance to pull the questions up.
Yeah, thanks so much, and thanks for having me here. I'm Deborah, the CEO and co-founder of Althea. And Althea is, we call them sort of broadband Legos, but it's a technology stack of software-defined networking, a price-aware routing protocol, and peer-to-peer microtransactions that really empower people to own different parts of the internet and coordinate that, and also to have, local governance of their networks as well. We've also built a lot of the supporting blockchain infrastructure, including Gravity Bridge, which is a Ethereum to Cosmos bridge in a decentralized way, so that all of that stack is resilient and sustainable.
Thanks. I'm George Farmer. I'm the CEO of Parliament Technologies, which is best known for owning the Parler brand. I'm going to say something, which is that this is the first crypto event I've ever worn a tie to. So this is unusual for me. Yeah, clearly. Originally from the UK, now based in Nashville, Tennessee, which is where Parliament is based. Parler is best known as a social media company, which Gerard mentioned was deplatformed in the aftermath of the November election at the beginning of 2021. We now have a substantial data center operation, cloud hosting, CDN delivery, DDoS, et cetera, as well as a social media app, which is best known for free speech, viewpoint neutral. We do not promote either side. We neither take an opinion on we try not to take opinion on any matters. We're involved in the blockchain space because we work very closely with Solana. We have pioneered some very innovative technology in the blockchain communication space, I would say. And bad luck, you've got me for the next panel as well, which I'm going to talk more about that. And so we have done quite a lot, particularly with regards to crypto wallets and some areas in the Web3 space with regards to NFTs, which are quite pioneering. And yeah, that's really the overview of the company and myself.
One more thing, based on your accent, were you from Alabama?
Yeah, correct, the Deep South, that's right. Yeah. Originally from London.
Don't you love that accent? So I too think that this is one of the only worthy opponents from a crypto-based organization to be able to attach to. My name is Michael Proper. I've actually spent 26 years in the tech world my whole adult life, and 13 of those years were helping to build really the centralized IT world. So we help create what's called the managed service provider industry. It's a $256 billion industry today. And we actually pioneered that, and we're ranked #1 in the world in that when we saw decentralized technology. And since 2009, we've been focusing on really building decentralized infrastructure. And it ranks in 3 different areas. So we talk about like Solana, like a layer 1 type chain, Ripple, Bitcoin, those are all layer 1s. And then we combine 2 technologies. So a phone-based technology, right? That's a decentralized phone connected with decentralized storage, which we've spent well over a decade building. So the last 13 years, we've literally been building decentralized systems. And we believe that all of humanity should be able to be individual. So everyone has a voice, everyone has a vote, everyone has a perspective, and everyone can be themselves. They can own themselves. They can own their data. They can own their digital lives. It doesn't have to be leveraged by these centralized systems. But we together must all see this and be able to unite to just adopt the system. That's really what it comes down to. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. I know there's a lot of energy into just putting these events together, so I'm grateful for our host and just that the caliber and quality in this ecosystem can actually take a step up. Because I've been to a lot of these events over the last decade plus, and it's just nice to see government coming together with technology.
Well, thank you, Michael. And I have to say, the reason why we all dress up is because my wife wants us to be able to dress up. So I have to dress up once in a while for her to try to impress her. But by the way, just as a FYI, Kathy is really the one who put this whole thing together. So thank you, Kathy, for an incredible job. All right, so I found the questions that I was searching for. So the first question that I have for the panel is, what are the most significant threats? You know what? That's the wrong panel. So let me ask you this. I'm going to have to wing it. I apologize. What is, from your perspective, what are some of the most significant threats to the free expression of information, and how do you see government's role, right, in that space, right? Because you know, the whole concept of fake news, right, fake bots, right? Does the government have a role in trying to protect us from those things, or you know, should they stay out of the way completely? So I'd like to just kind of get your perspective on that. We can just start here and go down.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think in order to kind of frame up the context of how I'd like to present this is looking at it actually from the infrastructure perspective. So the internet is, you know, comprised of your ISP that's delivering, you know, and laying fiber optic cable to your home. And then you have, you know, the data layer, you know, that's peering out to other providers on the internet. And then you have, you know, the content providers, your Twitter, your Facebook. So when we talk about that question, I think we have to start back at the infrastructure layer and access to that, just the same way that the government does step in and mandate that in housing, we can't discriminate around access. I think that's the same way that we have to protect the net neutrality of your you know, your fiber optic cable provider, whoever's providing that internet access to your home. And there's some problematic areas right now in kind of a couple different ways. One is actually in just fundamental access. It's very interesting to me that in Portland, Oregon, for example, 13% of all of the you know, population of Portland doesn't have access to broadband internet, but that number jumps to 30%. Talk about the Hispanic population. So we have an obligation, you know, from the regulatory and government perspective to ensure that everyone has equal access to that infrastructure. And then further, that that content isn't being throttled or censored from the infrastructure level. So I think that we can certainly talk about the other kind of overlay problems as well, like what happens with your content, should you have access to VPN, you know, what are your choices around that, and certainly those are important. And then there's a further layer, like, you know, Parler and Twitter and Facebook, things like that. But if fundamentally your fiber optic cable to your home is throttling and censoring your access to certain websites, or you don't have access to that at all, the other issues don't even matter.
Excellent. So George, what role should governments play in regulating communication?
Well, I'm horribly biased on this issue. I think there's a philosophical question to ask here, and that's kind of where I wanted to approach this question from. The whole basis of our economic system and the basis of societal evolution for the last couple of hundred years has been that human beings are rational creatures. This is the basis of the Enlightenment, and this is the basis that modern-day capitalism is founded on. If we don't fundamentally believe that human beings are rational creatures, then everything we do is irrelevant, because every economic model we have built is based on the idea that human beings are rational creatures. Therefore, what does this mean? This means that control of information is predicated on the idea that human beings cannot process information rationally, which therefore means that somebody else is deciding what information you should and shouldn't process, right? The idea of a free speech platform, which is what I'm CEO of, is basically that human beings are rational creatures and they can process information for themselves, right? I believe that government should have virtually no say in what information is controlled or otherwise to present it to individual human beings, right? The government should have as much of a role as anybody else, right, in presenting information. It should be up to human beings to decide what information they can and shouldn't believe. They should go out, find information for themselves. The whole idea of defeating bad ideas is that you show it good ideas. You can't control good ideas by just regulating out bad ideas, right? That's not actually how information is processed by human beings. And this has been evidenced so many times in society. You look at societies which try and control information, they eventually have a huge undercurrent of people who believe the opposite of whatever the government is trying to control, right? This has happened many times in Europe, by the way. I mean, in Germany, there are strong free speech laws about what can and cannot be effectively believed by society. What happens? There's a huge undercurrent of German society which now believes the opposite. You cannot regulate bad ideas out of existence. You have to allow people to come to the forum for debate and allow for them to see that there is a good idea which can counterbalance their bad idea, right? This is why I think the government should take a step back. It should allow for people to view bad ideas and good ideas together in the crucible of debate, right? This is the essence of our modern-day capitalist system.
Thank you very much, George. Michael, what role should government play in regulating communication?
I concur with George 100%. I think that it's deeper, though. I think that it's not just government. Underneath government, you have media, but above government, you have secret combinations.
I'm sorry, you have what?
Secret combinations. So there are secret combinations that actually control what happens in society, and I'll break it down for you. They're in different categories. They're in technology, they're in health, what someone would call health care, they're in pharma industries, they're in media. All of these different secret combinations then tie into the political step. So George's point around rational human beings, what I look at is perception is reality. We all have our own perceptions. We all have our own realities. They may be very different because of how we contrast data. I personally would, instead of having some media that actually says a summation of certain data points, let's take a reality, today, exactly today. We've got things in weather, we've got things in the body, certain statistics, and we've got things in war. These are all hot topics right now today. Would you trust 15 different individuals that just posted a video in the middle of a war that basically are showing bombs dropping, or they're showing people getting, whatever reality that they're currently seeing? Would you trust their post today that you can scroll through? I don't care whether it's TikTok, Facebook, Parler, Twitter, whatever channel you want to think you're getting information from. Would you take 10, 15 different perspectives on the ground, or would you take a summation of one through a media organization? So perception is reality. The key is no one should govern the way that you get data. We live in a digital world where data should be free, not censored, not controlled. I look at what happened to Parler and all of the other channels. Before Parler was shut down, there were other mediums that certain voices were heard on. And those individuals got whacked off those mediums. And then you see the medium get whacked. It's wrong. So I believe that free speech is an inalienable right for us as humans that are born into a world, not into a country, not into a province, not into a state or a county. We're born into a world that should be free, period.
Well, that's a tremendous segue into the next question, right? Which is, what is the current state of control over communications? So that, let me just go back the other way, because you kind of ended on that note, right? And you talked about the secret combinations, right? Which is kind of an answer to this question. Is there anything else you want to add to that? And if not, we
so I think it's you can take right from the secret combinations in the tech world, because they're the ones that actually control where the media starts. I would ask who in the audience doesn't have a phone in your pocket right now? Doesn't. Raise your hand if you don't. That's beautiful. Is it at your hotel? Okay, that's awesome. We got to get him a real phone. You get it through technology. The media comes through technology. And you're using one or two brands today. At least most of you are. Some of you have clear phones out there, but you're using either an Android phone or an Apple phone. Those are the linchpins that all they have to do is basically control those 2 points, and they've controlled us. What's crazy is we actually pay to be controlled. We literally, we pay money to get service that's filtered or controlled or even marketed or remarketed. There's a whole other conversation there. And we pay to have these listening devices in our pockets. It's time that we have a choice to actually be free, to choose true independence, to own our own data, to own our own freedoms, to own us, to prove who we are through a reputation that can be, we're at a crypto conference. What does that really mean? Crypto is short for cryptography. Cryptography is really just math. Math that's intelligently organized by a bunch of brilliant men. Scott, I don't know if you're here, but we got to see one of the original men that actually helped bring this to the world in 1991, last night. Thank you for bringing him here. He is an amazing human being. The virtues, the principles, the drivers around what he helped to build in what is really called not crypto, not cryptography, not even blockchain. It's called decentralization. You take the central systems out of it, you give the individual the voice, you give them the technology, you give them the ability to be free. But we have to actually work for it. It's not just going to happen. I would argue that 98% of the folks, maybe not George, when we were born, there was no internet. There was no mobile device. When George was born, there was an internet and there was a mobile device. That's different from my generation and most of your generation.
Wait, when I was born, there was no electricity.
Yeah, whatever. So,
Let me wrap it up. I want to get to George, because I want to make sure they have time to answer the question, too. But by the way, Michael has a table out there for clear communications, and I'll give you a chance to kind of do a plug for that, because I think people need to have options and stuff like that.
George, will you tell them how you weren't, the internet and the phones were here when you came into this beautiful world?
One of the advantages of sitting in the middle is that I always get to segue into somebody else's speech. I mean, the current state of control, I think, was the question. And, you know, I want to link it to blockchain because it's close to my heart and it's something that we obviously do a lot of work with. You know, I think that what we've seen, like, there's a kind of sense of irony. When Twitter was founded, Jack Dorsey famously said, we want to be the free speech wing at the free speech party. And, you know, now I would argue without a shadow of a doubt that clearly has not happened, right? So what does Web3 promise, right? What is, but not just Web3, like Web 4, Web 5. What does the future of the internet hold? I think that the future of the internet holds censorship-resistant communication in its heart. Right, that is the future of Web3. The blockchain promises a view for information which is not controlled by government, which is not controlled by anybody. It's not just government, by the way. It's any malevolent or benevolent actor in some ways. It should be up to the individual to rationalize that information for themselves. I would say that the current state of censorship of the internet is quite strong, and this is a product of Web 2, right? This is a product of centralization. And I was talking to Kathy earlier about this, which was saying that Moxie Mollenspike, who was the founder of Signal, you know, famously handed Signal over to be run by a nonprofit because he didn't trust his own motives. But he actually said that he wrote a blog post, which was his first blog post in 7 years. He just dropped it out of the blue last February. He wrote a blog post which basically said, Web3 is in danger of becoming Web2 if we don't hand it over to true decentralization. And I think this is very, very critical for this conference and for the whole of our Web3-based world, which is that we have to hand over Web3 to true decentralization. That means, like Parler, for example. What are we doing at Parler? I want to move the whole back end of my infrastructure onto the blockchain. That prevents me or anybody else, anyone within the organization or outside the organization, controlling what information people see. It's true decentralization. That ability for a user to go back and verify for themselves information that they've either seen or they saw in the past allows for them to, you know, verify it for themselves. This is critical to overcoming censorship with regards to communication.
Wait, one thing, George, when you leave here and you get mobbed by all this blockchain solution providers that want to talk to you, right? Afterwards, I'd love to talk to you because I want to hear a personal story. Maybe if we have time, Brian will let me know. I'd like to hear from you. When you found out about being delisted, I'm just kind of curious how you personally reacted to that and what went through your mind, right? It's kind of like when they ask the question, of President Bush when the guy whispered into his ear, America's under attack, what went through his mind. I'd like to have that, but I want to give you some time to think about it, so I'll come back.
Yeah, I want to bring us back to infrastructure again, because I think your points are important, but, and especially the point about how we perceive the internet through our mobile devices. And for a lot of the world, and now in the US, when we don't have net neutrality protections any longer, we're perceiving them through a very narrow view of the internet. I remember when I went to Colombia to build a network in Comuna 13, which is a lower income area in Medellin. There's a big sign that says internet available, Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp at no cost, completely free. And then the rest of the internet cost a very high cost that was unaffordable for that entire community. So here was an entire community of people, and what do you think their experience of the internet was? They had no access to other sites on the internet. They would not be able to choose to consume internet from Parler, because at the ISP level, at the fundamental access level, all that was available to them is Twitter, Facebook, and WhatsApp. And that's not the kind of world that I want my children to be able to access the internet in, or anyone here in the United States. But without those kind of core net neutrality protections, without the ability for people to build networks and own their own infrastructure, and to have that fundamental level of decentralization, the business models for a free Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp is pretty compelling. There really isn't any reason why we won't see that evolve. And actually, I was at an interesting keynote where a top provider was talking about their ability, in a positive way, to shape human behavior simply by throttling and censoring certain sites available on free Wi-Fi. So unless we think about the internet from the infrastructure up, I don't think we can, we can't kind of get to that next level of freedom.
That's a fantastic point. Where's Brian? Is Brian in here? I just need a time check to see, because I want to open it up to questions if I can. Good. Okay, super. So you guys have kind of touched on a couple of things and sort of blended our third and fourth question together. So I'm going to kind of blend this. And it is, how can technologies such as blockchain, Web3, and VPN impact the free expression of communication, good or bad, right? And then the fourth question that we have prepared is, how does your organization, product, or service result in the responsible, free expression of information? So I want to blend those two questions together, because then I want to open it up to you. Do you guys have any questions? Oh yeah, they are chomping at the bit. There's like, Gerard, get through your question, because I got one to ask. So, and I'm super excited that you guys are here. So let me just say it again. How can technologies such as blockchain, Web3, and VPN impact the free expression, good or bad? And four, how does your organization, product, or service result in the responsible, free, and expression of information? And you guys have covered a lot of that already. So if you have anything to add, please add it, and then we'll go ahead and open it up. And I'll start here, right? Because Michael, I know you and I could talk about this all day, right? So, but I do want to give them a chance to talk. So go ahead.
So I think fundamentally, blockchain gives us the building blocks to be able to coordinate decentralized systems and to be able to align and create new financial models. So one of the main problems with the internet right now is, just as I was describing earlier, the way that ISPs value capture. To capture the user and gather as much data and sort of get as much as they can from that. And that's because they spend a high amount of capital building infrastructure, and then that infrastructure is very siloed. You build one fiber optic cable, you build one radio, and that capital is on you yourself. You have to build another one in order to compete. But with blockchain technology.
Well, hold on a second. I want to really hear about Althea, because you guys have a very, very sort of specific response, and I think that they need to know about that.
Yeah, no, exactly. So the Althea technology stack allows different multi-entity ownership. So different people can own pieces of that infrastructure. That infrastructure can actually be tokenized in a liquid or free market. And then you can have peer-to-peer microtransactions and a separate service layer that is separate from the infrastructure investment. So you have interesting different investment models into building networks. And then the service and governance layer can still be local. And this is really important, especially for rural or low-income areas where the access is is poor already. And the Althea stack essentially coordinates the routing protocol between that network and then automatically remits that revenue share, sort of fundamentally changing it from, sort of a rental model to, bandwidth as a commodity. And then when you open up bandwidth as a commodity, and certainly this can be applied to other things like the electrical grid as well, we create open markets, and we see this work very well actually at the internet exchanges. And so the Althea is really the idea bring that open free market that exists at the internet exchange all the way down to the handset or device. And then you can give many different people the tool sets to build these networks and govern them.
That's awesome. George, so we got the infrastructure piece, we've got an application piece. Talk to us a little bit about the sort of how you guys are using the technology for the free, open expression of communication, and tell us a little bit about Parler. And then I understand you guys are also doing something with NFTs, so feel free to talk about that as well.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I kind of echo what I said before, and it's very interesting to hear about what Althea is doing, actually. So, I use that example from Jack Dorsey again, the free speech wing of the Free Speech Party. I don't want to just say it. I want to be it. But I also want to remove myself from the equation. By moving the whole of the back end of my company onto the blockchain, I believe that I'm actually guaranteeing that outcome, right? What's now being nicknamed DeSo, decentralized social, right? There are no real players in the DeSo space. This is what we want to be. We want to be the pioneering leader in this area by migrating an entire social media network onto the blockchain, right? This means that censorship-resistant communication becomes a reality for everybody. What does the blockchain, what does VPN offer to people right now? What do VPNs offer to people right now? They offer that opportunity for them to bypass control, right? The blockchain is ultimately, it effectively rationalizes the whole of humanity into individual nodes, right? That's kind of what all of us become. In doing so, it allows for free communication. It allows for free expression. It removes the Web 2 component of control. That is something that I'm fundamentally very interested in, and I want to promote that idea to the whole of humanity. I want for people to allow for themselves to control what information they process and see. We have done a lot in NFTs. I mean, we've done. I mean, I can talk all day about NFTs, but I won't bore you with it. But it's we've done a lot of pioneering work in NFTs. We've promoted different kind of style of NFTs. I believe that there's a huge amount of Web3 infrastructure which can be used in a different methodology. We're still cutting ground in this area. There's just no doubt about it. I mean, NFTs for fundraising is something that we've pioneered. Political campaign fundraising is something that we've looked at with NFTs. There are a couple of candidates out there who have done this already. We've worked with some of them. I believe that nonprofits can use Web3 and crypto to benefit themselves. There's a huge amount of nonprofits now using crypto donations as a form of raising money. We've helped them with that. And we've tried to just be an industry leader in this space. We also, for example, I spoke at a panel in Los Angeles about voting in the blockchain. I think that that's a very interesting area. There's a couple of companies which are looking at that, one of them being Votes, which is based up in Massachusetts, I believe. And that's an area.
George, just let you know, the CEO of Votes is in the room.
Oh, well, there we go.
Yeah, and he'll be on, I think is the voting panel is, I don't know if it's next or it's after that, but if you can stick around, we'd love for you to stay for that.
Great, thanks. But I mean, this is something that we want to help out with. We want to be an industry leader in censorship-resistant communication, and I want to remove myself from this equation. I want to remove the subjective component of human control from this equation. So this is what we're trying to achieve.
Excellent. If you guys have questions, why don't you go and line up at the microphone. Stan, I want you up front. All right? And they've been warned that I throw people under the bus all the time and throw them things that they're not using. Stan, come up front. I want you to, no, Stan, he's standing right behind you. Come up front. Michael, tell us a little bit about how technology can solve this problem. Tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing, your products and services. And then remember, these guys are waiting, so keep it brief. And then please go out to his table. They can explain everything in detail. It's a lot more that he can cover up here, but it's definitely worth listening to.
I'll do my best to keep it real brief and just basically follow on what George said. He's spot on. We have to take all of these centralized systems out of the equation, as well as individuals that are building the new decentralized systems. Jack Dorsey, the gentleman that started Signal, myself, we cannot overburden or be more than one voice. We are all equal. All humans are equal. Doesn't matter where we're born, what color our skin is, what kind of bank accounts, what we perceive as value. Bank accounts are just another number. In the crypto world, you actually get the numbers or the words yourself. So the simple reality is we help to deliver a service to this new decentralized world. The best thing that we can all do from my perspective is to really understand how we can actually unite and come together. About a year and a half ago, this Declaration of Unity was created. I believe it is just as important as the Declaration of Independence for the United States of America. What we can do is focus on understanding what it is and then uniting together in this new digital world. And by doing so, we can actually start communicating. I think that's one thing in society it's been hurt. When people or cultures create a new language, they can't communicate. But if we can use standards in this new digital world and we can come together, we can do anything. And with that, I'll stop.
Thank you so much. Stan, tell these guys a little bit about what you're doing, and keep it brief because I want to give everybody else, because as you guys ask your questions, other people are going to jump up. So Stan, go ahead and let everybody in the room know what you're doing.
Hi, thanks for this opportunity. What we are doing really resonates with what you were talking about. We are doing decentralized search over Web 2, and we are bringing it to Web 3. So basically, it's like search over Web 2 done by Ethereum network of nodes. And what I want to ask you is, what would be the role of algorithms in organizing these information systems that you were talking about? Because you see, usually people's attention is saturated. They are drawn in data. So it's very important to build high quality news feeds, data feeds. And that's where decentralized algorithms come.
That's a great question. Who wants to take it? George?
Sure, I'll have a stab.
I think that's more you than infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I always say about algorithms is algorithms are fundamentally written by humans. And this is something that kind of gets removed from the equation. When I worked in finance, it was always used, well, it's just the algorithms. The algorithms are doing the trading, and it was like, well, yeah, but who's writing the algorithms, right? And so who's actually putting the algorithms together to control that, to control whatever it is, right? Whether it be a trading mechanism, whether it be a search mechanism. I mean, I'm always interested by that because I say, well, fundamentally, that algorithm has to be programmed by somebody, right? Most algorithms that currently are subjected to individual, like all of you, when you look at your news feeds on social media, are subjected to an algorithm which is basically predestined what you're going to see, right? Because it pulls in all the data that you've uploaded to it, and then it basically churns back out what you want to see. We don't have any algorithms at our site, right? Because I believe that's a fundamental methodology of control. I believe that blockchain should be a method where algorithms don't have a role, right? Or at least have far less of a role. There will still always be a need for algorithms, but blockchain should be a methodology where we can actually bypass an algorithm-controlled search functionality, right? There are some search engines which are doing this already, like pre-search, I think is an interesting one. Look it up. It's got an interesting methodology for basically decentralized search engines, right? That's kind of something, again, you can stake to it. It earns you rewards according to how people search. That's an interesting methodology. I would like to see a world in which blockchain is not controlled by algorithms.
And Stan, if possible, maybe you could see him afterwards. George, you may have some contacts that he might be able to talk to ask questions, because GBA is really about a collaborative environment, right? And just like you guys said, when we work together, it's incredible stuff. So maybe you guys can connect afterwards and he can give you contact. Yes, sir.
Hey, Ryan Williams, Blockchain Academy. So as we move to this area of decentralized communications, and it might attract certain people for certain platforms, right, because they want that freedom. My concern is, where is real, meaningful, organized debate happening online, even in media right now?
It's in the GBA.
Absolutely,
Next
but
question.
that's, you're talking about rational, rational beings and thought, and unless anybody can put anything out there and that can resonate with somebody, but it might not necessarily be true. So where's the real pushback? Where is that actually happening? If you can point to one or two online platforms where real meaningful debate is being watched, or even media. I mean, there's Bill Maher, he might put some on, that's got its own bent, right? So where is this happening, and why is it not happening yet?
Want me to answer that?
Are
I
you?
don't think it is, and I think it's by design. I think that most platforms out there that actually, let's back up and put it right in the mouth of Mark Zuckerberg. He went on Rogan just a month ago and admitted to the world that the FBI, one of the most trusted ecosystems supposedly in the world, or at least in the United States, told him, oppress this news, spotlight this news. That's the #1 ecosystem in the world as far as humans that connect with content. There's not one other medium that has more eyeballs on it every single day than Facebook. That is from his own words. You can go read books called Tools and Weapons that's from the own words of the chief legal counsel at Microsoft, being honest about what is happening. There is no real honest conversation today because there is no honest platform today, period.
I think there's something, I wanted to counterbalance this a little bit, because I think we see a microcosm happening and by creating local platforms. So interestingly enough, there's a lot of Facebook community pages, right? And there's a lot of just, local verification of, local data that people can talk about. This happened, this is flooding, these are pictures, people verify it, I was there. So I think there could be an interesting approach of amplifying that localism in an almost a federated way. So there is maybe some positive things that are happening by allowing platforms to coordinate, at least locally, pretty well.
But that's an echo chamber in and of itself, right? We start to have
Sure, yeah. There's a way to perhaps federate that out a bit, but there is some human verifying elements that happen there, which is kind of unique.
Let's roll on to the next question. Alex, you have a question? Yeah. Yep. This is Alex Zuhl. He's the king of DeFi. So
According to Gerard.
Yeah.
Hi guys, Alex Schul, co-founder of Rome Blockchain Labs. So if I understand the thesis of the conversation thus far, it's essentially that centralized systems have been utilized by the powers that be to manipulate and exert their control, to direct social discourse, value exchange, so on and so forth, in a way that benefits a very small portion and throws the rest of the population in disarray. And that via true decentralization, you're able to actually extricate the population away from those systems and give them a completely flat playing field to have communication, to exchange value, all that fun stuff. My question, however, is that if we facilitate and indeed push society towards complete decentralization, remove all sense of regulatory oversight or any type of centralized control in any capacity, what happens to consumer protection? What happens to social recourse in the event that people who are rational actors decide to use that rationality to take advantage of other people? Or people who are rational actors but have asymmetric information, which is basically the basis of financial markets, are taken advantage of. I don't know if people knew this, but in the blockchain space, wealth and capital inequality is worse than it is in Wall Street. So for moving people to a decentralized system using completely cryptographic currencies, it's kind of like hopping from the pan into the fire. And this is coming from a guy who runs a decentralized finance laboratory, by the way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there has to be a midpoint somewhere. There has to be a balance, right?
Absolutely. And just so for you guys to know, Alex has tools to help educate people about decentralization and education. And also, if you guys are interested in DeFi, talk to Alex when you see him. And make sure you guys don't drink all the coffee before I get there. Panel?
Yeah, I mean, I'll I'll take a stab at that one. I think that's a very, very interesting question, and I think that it requires a very, very nuanced answer.
We are being recorded, I just wanted to remind you.
Yes is the answer. There has to be some kind of regulatory oversight at some point. You know, I would say that government oversight of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain world has been a bit like a sledgehammer to crack a nut. You know, they don't understand the industry, they fear the industry, they see it as a kind of, you know, world of freaks, and as a result, their regulation has kind of been, has sort of been in response to that. You know, it's when you have bipartisan Senate support for basically punishing El Salvador for adopting Bitcoin as legal tender, it's a nonsense. I mean, it's a complete nonsense. There are very few, we need politicians who understand the industry, is the short answer, right? You need, if you're going to have regulation to govern the industry, which it probably does require, then you need to have politicians who understand this. And that requires education. It requires organizations like this to integrate themselves into the halls of policymaking. It requires individuals who have come from the industry to be regulating the industry, right? You know, I think that there are incredible individuals who are working towards this. You actually had I forget which committee it was, but you had a subcommittee of the House of Congress, regulating this industry, or talking to individuals within the industry, talking about how they should regulate it. And it was one of the best House committees I've ever seen, because it was individuals who sit in Congress who actually understood the industry, answering questions or asking questions to CEOs of crypto firms. And it was a wonderful panel, and it was kind of how everyone should imagine that Congress is going to be run. Unfortunately, many panels are not like that. And that was a kind of, that's a discourse which we need more of. That's a discourse which needs to happen more often, and if we're going to have regulation to govern the industry, it needs to be led by people in this room.
If we really leverage technology, the core of your question can be addressed. But we as individuals actually have to be very serious about reputation. And if we're talking about crypto being cryptography, being math, in this ecosystem, all you have to do is prove that certain things have happened. Things at 3 levels. 1, the individual. 2, an organization. And that could be like a company or a trust. And then 3, the asset. And so if you actually build reputation into those 3 separate levels, you can trust an individual that you may have never met. I may just know your first name, but if I can get validation of where you're educated, your bank, and I don't even need to know a balance, a cash flow, a job, I can actually offer you credit. Credit is really the American dream. It's not to buy a house, but you can literally, your question is so beautiful.
Yeah.
But reputation in the digital world can actually solve the majority of what you're talking about.
Let's table this question for the next panel, which is information and data integrity, because I think that there's a lot of there. I can also prove one thing, and that is that we have run out of time. So guys, give a hand to the panel.